So now that we worked on the icons, worked on the splash screen, let's configure our project to be ready to be published. You can find a guide in the official docs under guides if you click on running on device. And yes, I'm not so happy with the naming of this point. It's not obvious that this also shows you how to prepare your apps for publishing. There you can switch between iOS and Android, and the first part is always about running it in development mode. But then at the bottom, we're talking about building the app for production. And for an iOS app here, we first of all need to remove an exception which was made for localhost. That was made so that our app can communicate with our development server, but we don't need that anymore. So let's go to Xcode, and there go to your info plist. There you can go to App Transport Security Settings, and under Exception Domains, you have localhost. Simply delete this row by clicking on it and pressing backspace. So that's the first step. The next step is that you need to configure a release scheme. So basically the build process to build it for production, which optimizes it. And thereafter, once you have set this up, you can build it. Now, before we do that, some words about configuring your app. In that info plist, as you probably already noticed, you can do a lot of configuration. You can change the name of your app as it will be displayed, for example, below the icon. There is the bundle identifier, which you can fine tune to your needs. This is like a unique identifier for your app, and here React Native gave you one by default, but of course you can use your own one. And the common rule is to basically use inverted URL, so you could use com dot and then your URL if you have one, or a fictionary URL which could represent your company. So whatever you want. Here I'll name this rncourse.awesomeplaces. Whatever you want. However, here this one is now taken. Thereafter, you can see if you want to restrict the device orientations. So you supported interface orientations. Right now everything is supported here. And so on. So here you can configure your app for iOS. Once you're done with all that, you can go to the menu and then Product, Scheme, Edit Scheme. And there you can now switch from Debug in the build configuration to Release. Now hit Close and now go to Product, Build. This will now build your project for production. So it will compile everything, bundle everything together, and give you a file that you could publish to the Apple Store, to the App Store. Now, publishing that also requires some steps through which I'll walk you, but this is the first important step here. So now the build succeeded, and you may ignore any warnings as long as it does. Now we can publish it. Before we do that, let's also prepare the Android app though. For that, we can again have a look at the official docs on the React Native documentation and switch to Android. We have the development documentation first, and then for building for production, there is a separate guide, no one knows why, so we can just visit that guide. Now in here, we learn how to create a signed APK. We already have an APK running on our simulator. That was an unsigned one. Now just as for iOS, where we also needed to do this for development, but where Xcode took care of it, we also need to sign our apps for Android before shipping them. We need to do that manual here, but it's not that difficult. First of all, we need to create a signing key. And for that, you can copy that command and execute it in your terminal or command prompt. This also works on Windows. But as it says here, for Windows, you need to navigate into this folder first in the command prompt. So I will do this on Mac OS here. I'll go back into my project and there enter this command I just copied, and you can replace the name here, my release key store, and the alias. I'll leave it at the defaults and just hit enter. And now you're prompted to enter a key store password. So I'm going to pick one here. You need to confirm it. Then a couple of information pieces about you. And once you're done, you will have this new file in your project directory, this my release key store file, which is password protected. Now, as a next step, we should move it into the Android/app folder of our project. So let's do that. Let's move it all the way into Android app. Yes, move. And thereafter, we need to edit this file, Gradle.properties. Now notice this is not in our project folder, but in your user folder on your operating system. Then I'm going to copy all that content here. And I navigate it into that folder, .gradle in my user folder. If you don't have that file yet, simply create it. Normal text editor suffices. Just make sure it's Gradle.properties, no .text at the end or anything like that. And then you can just paste in that content. If you change the key name or the alias, make sure to adjust it here too. And then enter your store password here. And once you did this, save that file. And now we need to edit our configuration in the Android app build Gradle file. So again, back in the project folder. You don't need to overwrite the full config, simply add the sign in configs part here. So I'm going to copy that. And then go into app and there build.gradle, and below the default config object, add the signing configs object you just copied. And also add this line here to the release object under build types. So build types, here I'll add this. Thereafter, you can generate the release APK by running this command in your project folder. So first cd android into that folder, and then that command I just copied. And now this will build and sign your project for deployment. This should now complete successfully. Now, as a side note, because I also mentioned it for iOS, if you want to change some config for Android, you do this in the source folder under main, and then in the Android manifest XML file. There, you can change the app icon, though that should be IC Launcher to use that launcher icon we created. You can also set up the app name, though here this automatically will refer to another file where this name is managed under resources values in this strings XML file. Here you can change the app name. It's managed by React Native though, so you can also always change this in the app.json file. And if you rerun npm run iOS or Android, here it then also updates, so that is something you can do. And if you ever needed to add anything else like permissions and so on, have a look at the Android manifest. There you also have your package name, so like the bundle identifier for iOS, and this will become important later too. With that, however, we built both apps. We built Android and iOS. Let's next have a look at how we deploy them.